always loved Westerns when I was growing up and shared that love with my brother. He had probably shown me the first Westerns I'd seen, and we'd watched many, many Westerns as we were growing up. And when I became a director, it was always clear to me that I wanted to make a Western. I love the terrain, I love the country, I love the way it looks, I like the horses, the guns, the costumes, the cowboys. I love the issues that come up in Westerns. I love the heroic figures that cowboys can represent, gunslingers. I love everything about the vitality of that period in our history. The Westerns were very much out of style at that time. They had gone completely out of favor and generally have had a spotty commercial record since, with a few exceptions. But we wanted to remind people of the pleasures that we had had from Westerns growing up. This was about loving all the elements of a Western, all the surfaces. In a way, it's a postmodern Western because it's very much aware of its antecedents and tries to use them in ways that are fun and interesting.
He had done body heat on a very carefully calculated and well-judged small canvas. The Big Chill, rather bigger. He was ready to do something quite large, and he wanted to do a Western. He knew that I shared his enthusiasm, and he very kindly asked me to write it with him, and I wound up being an associate producer as well.
A great many Westerns had been made in Europe in that time period because it was cheaper, but there's not one of them that really looks like America. I scouted in Arizona and New Mexico and Utah, but we were going in the middle of winter. We knew it had to be one of the southern western states, and when I saw New Mexico, I knew that was it, but I fell in love with it. The light. It was unlike any light I had ever seen. The landscape is spectacular. It's red cliffs. I went back there later and made Wyatt Earp in the same area. There were existing western towns, most of them in not very good locations, including Tucson, Arizona. But most of them were tiny, a few buildings here or there, or they were backed by some city skyline. And I wanted a very large town with wide streets, an expansive horizon that you could look out in every direction. And we found a magnificent spot outside of Santa Fe. And we built the largest western town that had ever been built at one time. Old Tucson had been added to over the years. This was a huge set. It's a very popular location, which has now been used probably 100 times in the last 13 years.
We had a camera up every day who took a shot a day. So, I'm sure it took a couple of months, let's say, to build it. Probably 3 months, And it snowed a number of times. Sometimes I couldn't go outside. The wind was howling so badly. And we couldn't paint because, the wind was blowing sideways.
We rigged some of the buildings that we had put up, for example, the Midnight Star Saloon, to be usable as sort of rough and ready sound stages. They were not, in fact, soundproof, but out there, except for the rare plane passing over, we just didn't have a sound problem. As long as we cut our own vehicles moving around, it was quiet enough. Well, we did shoot right through the winter. We began just after Thanksgiving and shot until the middle of March. We were in New Mexico in part looking for milder weather than we might have found farther north.
It's been challenging, cold. It's made everyone maybe a little tougher than they are. And I think in that way, the elements have worked to our advantage because there is a hard feeling through which the warmth of certain situations or characters comes through, but it has to be it's hard-earned when it does because the environment has not been terribly sympathetic to our needs, and we've had to battle them at times. But I find that invigorating. It adds an edge to things sometimes.
Jala was the gun advisor and quick draw expert. He had been famous since I had been, an 8-year-old. I used to see him on television. He had trained James Arness for Gunsmoke and all the cowboy series that I grew up with. He was quite an elderly man by this point, but still completely active and very good. And he trained all of the leads in gun handling.
He said, now this is Arvo Ohala. He'll be teaching you fast draw. He's one of the greatest fast draw teachers in the world. And Arvo was a great teacher, but I'm going, what is this Finnish guy doing in the Old West? Well, he taught Paul Newman in The Left-Handed Gun, and he taught Jack Palance. And I remember one day, he was talking about speed. He said, go for your gun, and I will go for my gun, and I'll fire off 2 rounds at you before you even get your gun out of your holster. I went, oh, come now. I don't think I'm quite that slow. And we squared off, and sure enough, before my hand got to the holster, he had killed me twice. So he was fast.
Scott Glenn got so deeply into that sort of gunfighter Emmett character that he was able to wear those buckskins with complete conviction. And Danny Glover, I remember the first time we gave him a Henry rifle. That's his weapon of choice and his father's in the story.
This ought to do.
Which is a huge and heavy and very impressive precursor to the Winchester repeating rifle. He took it away with him, and the next time I saw him with it, it was as natural in his hand as though he'd grown up with it.
You ever seen what a Henry rifle can do in the hands of somebody who knows how to use it?
I mean, they really did get into it deeply.
Jerry Gatlin was the stunt supervisor, and this movie is full of incredible number of very dangerous stunts. No big explosions or anything, but what I find to be much more interesting and more exciting, which is horse stunts and falls and fights. And Jerry handled it all very well.
We had really experienced wranglers who knew tricks like ways to rig a fence such that we could be shooting at ground level at Scott Glenn, lying on the ground, knocked to the ground, and have a horse run along the fence just in front of Scott Glenn, but from the camera's perspective, actually seem to hit him, and yet have him be quite safe. There was a similar technique used when one of McKendrick's cowboys seems to get killed in the stampede. The other skill that the Wranglers brought was the ability to read the script, see all the requirements, not just for the actors, but for the horses, and decide which horse to assign which actor so that they would not only be able to generally perform well, but there would be doubles. So that, for instance, Scott Glenn's Big Gray could be doubled by a jumping horse. The Pinto that Kevin Costner rides, which runs all the way through the story, had multiple doubles. And in the scene where Kevin, who did the stunt himself of jumping onto the Pinto's back during the jailbreak, we needed multiple doubles because the horses quickly learn that somebody's going to land on their back, and they tend to shy, and you have to change horses.
On days when we were riding the horses, they had to drag us off those horses at the end of the day. We loved it, especially Scott Glenn and I. We'd always want to run the horses, and they'd say, hey, you got to rest the horse, you got to rest the horse. We'd always want to just sort of gallop off and jump over things, and we loved our horses.
I started this movie, I barely knew which side of a horse to get on. Now I could ride horses. And I don't say that with too much ego, but I can ride. Show me a horse and I'll ride him.
We had to learn for that one shot where we're riding 4 in tandem. It's a very difficult thing to do, to get it just right, because some of the horses don't like the other horses and start kicking them. And anyway, we had to train them to do that, so we rehearsed that every day, and how to get the horse to stop and hit its mark exactly.
It's a great pleasure to get to stage your own showdown. In fact, of the whole complicated final act of Silverado, my favorite part is both Costner riding into town and shooting down the 2 guys at once, and Klein walking through the town and facing Dennehy finally. Those are those images are as beautiful as anything in the movie.
Here's Kevin representing the forces of civilization, of order, this white church behind him. And on the reverse, Brian Dennehy in this kind of demonic posture, and the backlight semi-silhouetting him, and behind him is nothing. The end of the town opening onto just the absolute void of the open desert.
We wanted it to happen slowly enough that those elements be revealed, but quickly enough that it be suspenseful, and quickly enough that that there would be a moment of sort of fire at the end.
Klein and Dennehy are both excellent in the scene. And the shots, it was done in Super 35, so that we could hold focus both on the very close gun that we see in the foreground and on the opponent down the street. And there's two shots, matching shots from each guy's holster. It's just pure fun to be able to finally stage something that you think is classic stuff.
There's a piece that's not in the movie, actually, when Payton regains his hat after killing the thief who took it, and Klein figured out a way to flip the hat up in the air and catch it with his foot, which was exactly the kind of grace and elegance that Payton needed and shows all the way through.
The hat was on the floor, and I did this thing where I kicked it, and it flipped over once, and I caught it and just sort of, it almost landed on my head, and Larry cut it out of the film. I go, Larry, that's so cool. Yeah, it took too long, though. Or it seemed like a circus stunt.
Bruce Broughton created an amazing score. It's a terrific theme from Silverado.
Remember, there are two real themes, two melodies. There's the main Silverado theme, which is used for the town. It's used for their friendship. Every time the guys come together, every time they split apart, the theme is used again. And then the other theme is what I always thought of as the family theme, which was the homesteaders, the kind of warmth of when the brothers meet their family again, that theme is played.
Oh, come here.
But it was not an aggressive theme. It was nothing more than just a little warm theme. In some ways, it's a typical old movie score. In other ways, it has very old-fashioned kind of music from 100 years ago, the style, and then it also has a lot of contemporary stuff.
I think there's a kind of warmth in the film that has won it friends ever since it was released. You know, it continues. I meet people every day who have just seen it for the first time on tape and are new fans, and that's very gratifying.
We wanted to make a movie that had all the vitality, the enlargement, the hope, the promise of a brand new land that was just being settled much earlier than the westerns we'd been seeing at that time. We wanted to make one that was optimistic and sort of ebullient, really, about all the possibilities of a western.